I want to be clear about one thing before I tell this. I did not think I was doing anything remarkable. That is the part the Conclave Review Board kept circling back to. In the months after Station Orithsev filed its incident report. Not what I had done. They understood that by the third week of the audit. What they could not absorb was the part where I had not noticed. Where I had sat at a restricted access data terminal for 72 hours across 4 working sessions, threaded myself through 6 active research queues in 3 disciplines I was not trained in, contributed substantive and verified solutions to 3 open problems that had sat unresolved for a combined 19 years, and then gone to dinner. I remember the dinner, reconstituted grain paste with a protein supplement the commissary called enriched. I was thinking about the thermal variance problem in Q3. I had not quite closed it, and whether the approach I had used on the fluid dynamics set might generalize. I was not thinking about the fact that I had just solved the fluid dynamics set. That was done. I had moved on. My name is Yena Vasht. I was 43 years old at the time of the incident. I'm a materials scientist by training, stress fracture propagation in high-load composite structures, specifically. I had no background in xenobiology, no formal training in conclave atmospheric chemistry, and no credentials whatsoever in the deep-field stellar cartography that made up the 4th and 5th research queues I apparently wandered into. I was at Station Orithsev on a cooperative exchange assignment. The arrangement was routine. One human specialist embedded with a conclave research station for 18 months, contributing expertise in her designated field, observing conclave methods, fostering what the treaty documents called productive cross-cultural scientific dialogue. I was there to study composite stress fractures in conclave hull materials. That was the whole of it. The data terminal was a courtesy. Researcher Second Tev Maron explained this to me when they handed me the access chit 3 days after my arrival. The terminal was a general index unit, not my designated workstation, which was in the materials lab on level 4. The general index gave access to the station's full open archive, every active research queue, every unresolved dataset, every open problem the station had logged and not yet closed. Standard access for a conclave researcher of senior grade. They gave it to me, Tev Maron told me, because it was the polite thing to do, because I was a guest, because withholding it might have seemed inhospitable. You are welcome to review anything that interests you, Tev Maron said. They had the careful, deliberate politeness of someone extending a courtesy they were confident would not actually be used. It is general access only. The notation fields are read-only for visiting exchange staff. Thank you, I said. I did not tell them that I had already been reading the queue headers for 40 minutes. I want to explain what the terminal looked like to me, because this is the part the review board found most difficult to reconstruct. 43 active research queues, spanning 6 disciplines, accumulated over 11 station years. To the conclave researchers at Orithsev, it was a sorted set of specialty problems, each queue the province of a specific team, requiring specific training, specific decades of disciplinary context. The xenobiology team worked xenobiology queues. Atmospheric chemists worked atmospheric queues. The station's research AI coordinated within disciplines, but was not, as I later learned, designed to generate solutions across them. Cross-disciplinary synthesis required a senior researcher to manually assign and oversee. To me, it looked like a pile of interesting puzzles. I am not saying this to be dismissive of the conclave's organizational structure. I understand now why they sorted things the way they did. I am saying that I looked at 43 open problems across 6 disciplines, and my first instinct was to start reading all of them. Not the ones in my field, all of them, because some of them were interesting. Because the header on Q12 mentioned a thermal variance anomaly that sounded like it might be related to something I had read in Q31, which was in a completely different discipline, and I wanted to know if that was actually true. It was true. That was part of what I solved. Tev Maron pulled my terminal logs on the morning of the 73rd hour as part of a standard audit. This is what they told me later when we were debriefing. They said the audit was routine. They said they had not been watching me specifically. I believe them. There was no reason to watch me. I was a human materials scientist with read-only notation access to a general index terminal embedded at a research station on a courtesy assignment. I was, by every reasonable metric, not a person whose data terminal required monitoring. The audit log showed 4 sessions, 40 minutes on the day of my arrival, 6 hours the following day, 9 hours after that, 11 hours ending approximately 2 hours before Tev Maron pulled the report. Total, 26 hours and 40 minutes across 72 hours. Tev Maron told me later they had initially assumed a logging error. Then they read the notation fields. I should clarify, the notation fields were read only for me, which meant I could not post formal solutions to the queue records. What I could do, what the access tier permitted, was flag items for review and attach comments to the flag. I had used the flag and comment function extensively. For 3 of the open problems, my comments ran to several thousand words each, detailed, structured. In 2 cases, cross-referencing data from queues in unrelated disciplines that I had apparently read and retained and connected in the course of working through the primary problem. In 1 case, I had attached a proposed methodology using an approach I had adapted from the stress fracture propagation literature in my own field, which I had noticed bore a structural resemblance to a pattern in the atmospheric chemistry dataset that the atmospheric chemistry team had not, apparently, considered significant. They considered it significant after that. The review board convened 6 weeks after Tev Maron filed the incident report. I was present for parts of it. The board was 9 members, 3 from ORITHSEV's senior research staff, 2 from the Conclave Central Science Directorate, 4 from the Exchange Program Oversight Committee. The session I attended was the one where they asked me to describe my process. I tried. I told them I had read the queue headers because they were available, and I was curious. I told them that several problems had looked related from the headers alone, and that I had read deeper to find out if they were. I told them that 2 problems in disciplines I had no training in had reminded me of problems I had encountered in my own work. The underlying structure seemed similar even if the surface variables were different, and that I had followed that resemblance to see where it went. I told them I had flagged my observations because there was no reason not to, and that I had not filed a formal notification because I had not been sure any of it was useful and had not wanted to bother anyone. The board was quiet for a long time. The researcher from the Central Science Directorate, a senior figure whose name I was not given, asked me one question. She asked whether I had done this kind of thing before. Read across unrelated fields, noticed structural resemblances between problems in different disciplines, followed those resemblances without being assigned to. I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said, I think most people do, when the material is available. The board recessed. I found out later, through Tev Maron, who had been kind to me throughout, in the careful, slightly alarmed way of someone who has discovered that their courtesy has produced an unexpected result, that the 3 problems I had contributed to were not in the Conclave's research structure considered related. They were in separate queues, assigned to separate teams, under the purview of separate discipline leads. The station's research AI had access to all of them and had not identified a connection. No researcher at ORITHSEV had identified a connection. The connection was not the kind of thing, Tev Maron explained, that the Conclave's specialist structure was designed to look for. We route problems to experts, Tev Maron said. We do not typically route experts to problems they have no training in. Why not? I asked. They looked at me for a moment, because they cannot solve them. I did not know what to say to that. It seemed to me that the relevant question was whether the problems looked interesting, not whether you had the credentials to address them. But I had the sense by then that this was the difference. That what I had done, reading everything available, treating every open problem as potentially connected to every other, following resemblances across disciplinary walls without asking whether I was qualified to be on the other side, was not a methodology the Conclave had considered, because it was not a thing their cognition inclined them toward. The Exchange Program Oversight Committee amended the Cooperative Research Access provision 3 months later. Human exchange personnel were reclassified from General Index Read-Only to Flagged Access Supervised, meaning any flag or comment I attached to a queue item would be automatically escalated to a senior researcher for review before entering the record. Tev Maron presented me with the updated access chit personally. They were gracious about it. The committee wants to be sure your observations receive appropriate expert evaluation, they said. I understand, I said. I did not say that I had already read the updated access terms and noticed that the notation comment character limit had been quietly removed. I do not think they noticed that I had noticed. I went back to my terminal and kept reading.